On technology trends, so one of the three I would point out, on the technology trends, agentic AI is the one of the decade. I think blockchain and stablecoins in particular is a very interesting one. We're leaning into that as well. Won't be as disruptive, I believe, but will certainly be part of our future. Beyond technology, the other one that is extremely impactful, of course, especially if you're a global company, is geopolitics. The world is getting a little bit more complicated than it perhaps was a few years ago. Regulation is starting to diverge. Our ability to operate in certain countries is a little harder. And as an international company, you're a guest in all of these geographies. And so you have to make sure that you can meet the agendas of governments all over the world.
Welcome to FinScale, the show that takes you to the heart of finance transformation. Every week, Selene Niederkorn and her guests explore new initiatives shaping the future of the industry. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FinScale. I'm super happy to have Joren Lambert, the Chief Product Officer of MasterCard Group, on FinScale today. Hi, Joren. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Very well. Yourself?
Great. Super happy. Thank you again, Joren, for taking the time. Maybe the audience will realize that we know each other for 25 years now. And then we recently reconnected, and thank you, because I know that you have an agenda like a minister. And thank you to your team, because they very kindly organized this recording. Joren, can you take 2-3 minutes to explain a little bit the evolution of your role within the group, because you've been working for many years at MasterCard?
Yeah, of course. So indeed, I've been with MasterCard for 23 years. So saw quite a few evolutions in payments over that time. And right now, as Chief Product Officer, I'm essentially looking after the big platforms and product lines for the company. So that is, on the one hand, the big machine, let's say, that processes 170 billion transactions worldwide. Our digital platforms. So if you make a mobile payment, for example, that has some specific cryptography that is managed by, again, some big machines that allow these transactions to be processed at very high speed. I look after the acceptance network, so that everywhere where you can use a MasterCard card in the world, that needs to be nurtured and evolved and grown. And so look after that piece as well. I look after the issuer solutions. We distribute our products through about 23,000 banks. That is products and solutions that we put in place for these banks. And then I have a group that looks really at the next frontier with agentic, with digital assets and crypto. And so very much looking at both the here and now, and making sure that the system works every day, every minute of the day, or every second of the day for 3.5 billion people, but also looking at the next decade to make sure that we are getting ahead of the trends and making sure that we're relevant and offer the right solutions for customers a decade from now.
And the CPO function has been existing for many years?
It's a role that I have for now about 2.5 years. Before that, I was Chief Digital Officer, so it wasn't like a big leap. It was just a number of other programs that were added to the scope.
So less hours to sleep during the night.
Yeah, or just a different way of organizing oneself, I suppose. Yes.
Nice answer. Okay, so Joren, I would like first to start with a broad question, because I believe that the audience is really keen on understanding the top trends and areas that are important for you for the coming years, because we're beginning 2026. What is exciting you, and where do you see threats also coming from?
Yeah, we could probably take an entire week just on that question. And it is really the essence of my role, is to figure out or to separate the signal from the noise, understanding what are the things that will have real impact on our future, and then figuring out through the position, the value chain that we occupy, how can we secure our future. I think that's a very interesting job. It's what really can change the trajectory for us as a company, or in both ways. And if you'll allow me, so then I'll take us a little step back to kind of maybe demonstrate to the audience how we're thinking about this. The great news about payments is that it is a relatively slow thing. If you think about, in your, probably in the year 2000, you were paying with cards with chip and PIN. You were dipping your card and you're doing the PIN. Now you're doing contactless. That took 20 years. Right? Now and these evolutions within payments take a long time. Why? Because it's a very long value chain, many intervenience in the value chain, but also you need to change consumer behavior, and consumer behavior moves relatively slowly, right? So it's not like you can just drop an app and push a button and the whole ecosystem changes. It requires a lot of moving pieces. And that's both really hard, but it's also really interesting because getting the right levers in place to make that change is what is critical. And so if you think back, there's a number of the first trends that we look at are technology trends. Why? Because the technology trends goes way beyond payments, way beyond our space. It changes the way the world operates. And therefore, you need to then understand how we, within that world, can operate. And there's lots of, news articles every day about this new technology and this new thing. And it's very tricky to figure out which are the technologies that will be truly transformative versus the kind of little hype that comes out every other week. And if you then reflect back, there's like over the last kind of 50 years, there's been one big technology change about every decade. And every one of those has completely changed how consumer behaves, have completely changed how the balance of power between different companies emerge. It has created business models, it had destroyed business models, and has created companies and destroyed companies. Mm-hmm. So getting those technology waves right is existential for us and for many others, right? So in the 80s, for example, that was the PC. That's probably before your time. So then it was when I was a kid. The PC changed everything. And the balance of power was with Mac and with MS-DOS at the time, right? Those were the operating systems, but everybody had to adapt. In the 90s, that was internet, right? It was Netscape and then Google and AOL and stuff like that. Everything changed. Every single business had to change from the pre to the post-internet change. Many were destroyed, many were created. In the 2000s, that was obviously mobile internet, right? Mm-hmm. Not just mobile, not 2G, not 3G, which was just texting and an email. It was 4G, broadband, mm-hmm. With the iPhone 5 coming in. That set the tone for businesses like the gig economy, right? That couldn't have existed without mobile broadband. Mm-hmm. In the 2010s, that was obviously cloud. Again, if mobile broadband, it was all about iOS and Android. Cloud is all about AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure. Yeah, exactly. Azure. And then what is it now? Well, chances are, pretty good chances now that it is AI and in particular agentic AI, which sounds like it's again one of these big waves which will destroy companies, create companies, change business models, and ultimately change balance of power. Right? The big players there seem to be emerging as OpenAI, Google, very well positioned in this. Again, Microsoft with Azure, it's built on the cloud. Microsoft, pretty good. But there's some new kids on the block as well. There's an Anthropic there. There's a Perplexity there. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this evolves. Now, why am I kind of expanding on this? If you think about payments, what changed the trajectory in payments in essentially 2012 was mobile payments with Android and iOS, in particular Apple Pay, Google Pay, has been a huge shift. Before that, we had been experimenting already with mobile payments, mainly with telcos, SIM-based payments. Didn't scale because it was too fragmented. the control points were just all over the place. And in the early 2010s, we figured, okay, well, this is not going to work. What is actually going to work is being aligned with those control points, iOS and Android, that can really scale and embed it in the operating system. And so we then went to Apple, went to Google, went to Samsung, proposed how to embed contactless, which already existed, in the mobile devices, how to make sure that we bring 3 billion consumers there, 150 million merchants there, just by using the form factor of the phone. That went really well. They adopted that with gusto. And that was a real change in the trajectory for us as a company. Mm-hmm. And we very much feel like the same needs to happen now. Right? Aligning with those control points in the industry that will change the trajectory, making sure that we embed our products into that so that we enable their objectives, but also ours. And that will actually make sure that we're relevant for the next decade. So this is the kind of how we unpack these technology trends, which is why I believe that agentic AI is the next trend that will probably be extremely impactful, more so than blockchain. Although blockchain,
I was about to ask you.
it's also really interesting, but it's of a different nature, right? Yeah. Agentic AI will change, is a paradigm shift on how consumers will shop.
Yeah, clearly.
They shop through an e-commerce patterns, which is very standardized, right? You order on a website, you discover your product, you then go to a payment page, you fill out your payment choice, and then you check out. In agentic commerce, that pattern change. You no longer discover it through on the merchant side. You will actually do a prompt. That prompt will get you to a product selection, which is very much faster, much less cognitive toil. And then once you have that product selection, you will almost certainly initiate that payment, not from the merchant side, but from the agent side. It's a very, very, from the consumer, it's not that much of a leap. It's not that hard to do. It's kind of fairly intuitive to do that, right? But from an ecosystem side, it's a fundamental change because today in payments, you have a consumer initiated payment, i.e. the consumer pushes a button and initiates it, or you have a merchant initiated payments, like Netflix pushes the payments because the consumer is not there. Mm. You have an agent initiated payments. It's a third party, neither the consumer nor the merchant, that actually initiates the payments and injects something in an ecosystem that is a machine, right? So getting that right in a way that consumers can trust, that merchants can trust, that people have recourse if something goes wrong, is a super interesting problem, and it's the one that I think we can get right. So on technology trends, so one of the three I would point out on the technology trends, agentic AI is the one of the decade. I think blockchain and stablecoins in particular is a very interesting one. We're leaning into that as well. Won't be as disruptive, I believe, but will certainly be part of our future. Beyond technology, the other one that is extremely impactful, of course, especially if you're a global company, is geopolitics. The world is getting a little bit more complicated than it perhaps was a few years ago. Regulation is starting to diverge. Our ability to operate in certain countries is a little harder. And as an international company, you're a guest in all of these geographies. And so you have to make sure that you can meet the agendas of governments all over the world. You can meet the requirements of regulation all over the world. And that just adds a layer of complexity and costs to what we had before. But that's just a reality that we have to work with. We're lucky in that even though the world is getting more fragmented from a geopolitical point of view, commerce remains very international, remains very global. I don't think we'll see a deglobalization or a decoupling of economies the way some people perhaps hope. That's just not possible anymore. Right? Supply chain that commerce needs to flow. And that is essentially what we do. So I think it's a little harder, but we're not despairing on that front. And then the other piece, of course, is the consumers. Consumer behavior changes. Consumers are increasingly comfortable with technology, quick to adopt new technology, wants instant gratification. They don't want to wait for things. They expect trust. They expect convenience. They expect security. And it's up to us to then deliver that, right? So if I lift up technology, geopolitics, and consumer trends, it's what guides our, let's say, product decisions over time. And those are both short-term decisions, but also looking at the next decade to make sure that we take the right turns and don't end up in the wrong side of innovation.
Thank you very much for this very big introduction, Jorn. If we stop a little bit on the agentic commerce, that would be worth understanding the way you built your first pilots, how it happened internally. The second question, what are the most use case you concentrate on and that you believe will scale first? And then third question, I do also long questions. How do you ensure reliability and security?
Three great questions and related questions. Let me perhaps start with the second one. Because people often think, I'm never going to have an agent do my shopping for me. That's absurd. But I actually think it's a lot more intuitive than people think. People talk about agentic commerce as if it's some kind of machine that does your groceries, but that's not what we're talking about, right? The first phase is what people in the industry call agent-assisted commerce. And all this is that you're using a agent like a ChatGPT or a Gemini to do your product discovery, and from there, make the transaction. What the consumer gets to see as they make the transaction is almost identical as what you do today on a merchant site, except you're not on the merchant side, you're on a ChatGPT or a Gemini. And so I want to buy some running shoes. I will do my prompt. I will say, I want running shoes for long distance running. I am an overpronating person. I'd like white shoes and with good reviews. And they will produce 3 shoes, a Hoka, a Saucony, and a ASICS shoes. And then I choose, okay, I'll have the ASICS shoes. And rather than then go into ASICS website, I just do buy. The price is there, the conditions are there. I do buy, and the agent then fills out the form at the merchant site, so to speak, right? For the consumer, it's very easy. It's kind of a buy and you complete it. That kind of use case, I think, will scale very fast. There's no real user leap to make. The difficulty in scaling is actually the piping behind. The agents need to integrate with the merchant's catalog. The conditions needs to be represented the right way. The credentials need to be securely transferred. All that is piping. Consumers don't need to shouldn't worry about that. But it's going to move fast. Then autonomous agentic payments, whereby you're saying, I want to go to a concert of Beyonce. They're coming to Luxembourg. She's coming to Luxembourg in July. Tickets will come out in March. Please, as soon as they're available, get me 300 euro tickets for that Beyonce concert, so that you don't have to remember the 1st of March at midnight to log in. And so that is now on the 8th of January or whatever date, you put the instructions in, and the transaction autonomously happens on the 1st of March. So that is perhaps a little bit longer, because now the consumer needs to make a bit of a leap. They need to trust an agent to execute more complex instructions sometime in the future with your money. But I still believe that has relevancy in certain use cases. And so I think that will come as well, right? But so to me, it's certain, or almost certain, that this will scale for the very simple reason that it is easier for consumers. And, the law of least effort is a very powerful consumer behavior law in our business. So once you kind of accept that or believe that, then okay, what do we do about it? How do we do the piloting, as you say, and then how do we scale it in a secure way, right? And the way we pilot is actually we just engage with an OpenAI, a Microsoft, a Gemini, and others, but also some of the underlying ecosystem players like a Cloudflare and others, to just make sure, okay, well, how does this all work? What do you need? What do we need? How do we ensure, and that's the biggest question, how do we ensure that we retain trust in the ecosystem, right? Because guess what? There will be lots and lots of malicious bots,
of course,
that will present themselves as an agent who will want to get your money, right? And so we need to find a way to essentially do four things, right? To make sure that legitimate agents are invited into the system and malicious ones are kept out. We need to make sure that when Solène buys, it is Solène and not somebody pretending to be Solène. Mm-hmm. We need to make sure that if Solène wants those Hoka shoes, that this actually instruction goes to a real merchant of Hoka shoes and not some malicious one. Mm-hmm. And then we need to make sure that if Solène ends up with the wrong shoes, or she believes she ends up with the wrong shoes, that she has recourse, even though she has never interacted with Hoka.com. Right? Mm-hmm. That last one is a really important one because many people will do a prompt and then expect or believe that they have bought the prompt. But if I say, I want these ASIC shoes and Hoka shoes, and I say in my prompt, I want them to be waterproof, and then the shoes are represented, that doesn't mean that the shoe represented exactly matches the prompt. They may not be waterproof. Mm-hmm. It's important to make the distinction. What do you prompt and what do you buy? And therefore, it's important that when you get the non-waterproof Hoka shoes, and you say, no, I'm going to complain, that we can say, no, Solène, here's what you actually bought. It's not the prompt, it's here what you bought. So that feedback loop needs to be put in place. And so we've had long discussions with all of these players saying, how do we make sure that this is very secure and that people can trust it? Because the moment on Reddit or on X, people start showing their mishaps, the whole thing can come crashing down, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of been the work of the last, I would say, 9 months to a year. And we've now done the first transactions, both with OpenAI, with Microsoft actually this week, with Shopify, Stripe, and Checkout. And so that is actually now starting to really be hardened and will start scaling in the next kind of weeks as more and more merchants come on board and consumers gain confidence. Will it take over the world over the next four quarters? No. Will it be a meaningful part of the over internet traffic in the next 2 years? I believe so.
Yes, clearly. I'm fully aligned. I mean, I'm super interested by what you tell us, and I have the same vision.
Our task is to make sure that you can do that comfortably without worrying about it, right? And that's the challenge, and I think we're up for it.
But it's a huge challenge. Let's be honest.
It's complicated. There's a lot of bad guys out there, and they're very well funded. They're very smart, and so we need to stay ahead of it and architect it in such a way. A little bit like mobile payments was not that different, right? In mobile payments, we introduced tokenization to secure it. Every hacker in the world will try to get into your phone and will try to steal your credentials. Mm-hmm. If you make these credentials useless outside the environment of your phone, then you solve the problem, right? And that's what we've done with tokenization in mobile phone. We have some other clever ideas on agentic, but that's really what the task is.
Perfect. So the second point that you mentioned is blockchain and stablecoins. This is a topic I've already touched upon on FinScale with Axel, the CEO of Kulipa. I've seen that MasterCard was supporting USDC, USDG, several stablecoins. So my first question to you is, what's your vision in this use of stablecoins in this MasterCard ecosystem? And what are the main criteria that you have in mind when you select those digital assets?
Yeah, great question, and it's another really interesting phenomena. It's actually like conceptually harder to wrap your head around it, because it's a re-architecture almost on how kind of macroeconomics work, right? Maybe just a small parenthesis on what a stablecoin actually is, right? And we view it very much as a utility, as a means of value exchange for the public blockchain. Now, what does that really mean, right? So the public blockchain is a distributed ledger. Your money that you currently have with your bank can't live on a public distributed ledger. The money that you have in your bank account is a liability to the bank, and therefore has to sit on the bank's ledger by nature of that instrument. And so you can't really port it to the blockchain because that's not the bank's ledger. So you need something else. And that something else is a stable coin, which is 100% backed by fiat currency or by treasuries. And therefore is not tied to a bank's ledger, and therefore can live on that public utility. And so fine, that's an interesting concept. Now, what is it for? What do people do on the public blockchain? And that is really where this question comes: is it a solution? Is it a solution looking for a problem, or is there actually a problem to solve, which has been the debate for a long time? Right? Today, there's about 300 billion in stablecoin issuance out there. So large, not huge, but large. I mean, tiny compared to what the actual money is in the bank ledgers, but still large. But what's fascinating is that it produces over 30 trillion in flows. Now, why is that? It's because people use it for trading, right? It's kind of buying and selling Bitcoin, essentially, right? They buy that with a stablecoin and they sell it and they receive stablecoin back, and then they off-ramp it into their bank account. That is not so interesting to us. Right? That's not payment, that's trading. But we're starting to see these stablecoins being used for payment use, essentially in 3 or 4 use cases. One is remittances. People actually sending to Nigeria, Malawi, or Philippines, and that is more efficient than the existing rails that take more time and often more costly. People use it for disbursements. Like if you think about TikTokers in the creator economy, could sit anywhere in the world, they need to be paid. Paying that TikToker or that YouTuber or that digital nomad via stablecoins is often easier than the fiat world. And then there is this phenomena of asset tokenization. People tokenizing EFTs or treasuries or potentially one day land titles to buy and to sell these tokenized assets. Once again, you need to have a currency that can live on the blockchain, and that is stablecoins. All this to say that it is very early days. We're seeing very interesting use cases. We see real utility, real usefulness of these instruments for these use cases. And therefore, we believe it will be part of our collective payment future and hopefully part of the MasterCard payment future. And so again, a little bit of a long introduction, but I just wanted the audience to understand why we think it's not just a fad or a hype or something for the geeks, but something that has real utility out there. And so we've started to invest in that. We started to adopt a number of stable coins into our network so that entities can start working with this. The way we approve or integrate some currencies is very simple. It's firstly, it has to be compliant with law. And we have obviously now the Genius Act, we have MiCA, we have regulation coming in that allows us to say, okay, this is a compliant currency, it's a secure currency, truly backed by the right instruments, and therefore we can adopt it. And then secondly, we need to see demand. The moment that you hear from our customers, okay, I want to settle with you in USDC or another one, then we said, okay, well, we can now adopt it and lean in. We're at the very early innings, Solène, on this. We'll make significantly more investment, I believe, in this in order to not just enable the wiring, but actually enable the use cases. And so I'm quite excited about what will enable as well beyond what we're seeing today.
So you mentioned the Genius Act, you mentioned MiCA. Regulators throughout the globe are sending very mixed signals, to be honest. So how do you navigate this regulatory complexity?
Yeah, it's a little complex, but fundamentally it's not different to any other space, right? The regulation in money transfers, in how e-money licenses is operated, diverges as well across the world. I think here to your point, we're seeing a lot more divergence, mainly because it's a lot more nascent and a lot more kind of politically charged in certain places. But I think the way we simply do that is we adopt or adapt to the local regulation accordingly. And so we will be obviously Genius compliant in the US and MiCA compliant here in Europe. And where there is cross-border, there's actually the FATFA travel rules that apply on those currencies as well as on fiat currencies. And so we will continue to navigate and apply those regulations where needed. In places where we can't operate, we won't operate. It's as simple as that, right? If India or China doesn't want to see any inbound traffic of stablecoins, then we will just not allow that on our system. Very much the same way we do that in today's world.
I always have a sort of regulation point in my episodes. It's part of the game.
It's a good one because it's a complexity, but it's also, I think, a friend, right? Because the moment that you can operate, I mean, frankly, stablecoins, we couldn't really touch that. The banks can't really touch that without a regulatory regime. That's why it has evolved outside the financial system. Now that there is a regime, banks, regulated banks can now kind of play. We can now play. And so it's, whereas it's a big headache in many cases, it's a friend, as well, because it allows us to get, frankly, to get it mainstream, right? Stablecoins cannot scale to, everyday use cases without the financial system. I'm very deeply convinced of that. This theory that, it's a separate thing, the early stablecoin advocates were very much saying this is against the banks, an alternative to the banks. I personally think that's doomed. You need the financial system to embrace it. You need, my mother or my aunt to be able to access this from their financial institutions. Otherwise, it will remain very niche.
Yeah, at least for the next 10 years, I guess.
Exactly.
We'll see. Okay, if we go back now to more, I would say, traditional payments, there are some, I would say, huge improvements with, for instance, real-time card payments, account-to-accounts, and many other improvements. How would you say that it will evolve? Because account-to-account rails already open a lot of possibilities. So how do you see these real-time card payments coexist with these national schemes?
The existing of national schemes is not new. What is new is that they are now much more digitally sophisticated. And there is a user front end now, usually what people call an APM or an alternative payment means, that is very good and very convenient for consumers. And so those systems are really emerging as full-fledged consumer payment systems, as opposed to kind of rails in the back, right? And to us, that's, frankly, a bit of a wake-up call because, those constitute competition. But there's a couple of answers to that, or a couple of ways that we view that. Right? The first point is consumer choice is a good thing. It keeps us all on our toes, and we are always happy to see more diversity, because that means that actually you get a faster evolution from cash to electronic means, and that brings an overall more growth into the ecosystem, right? So as a principle, we welcome those systems to be there, because it just gets higher sophistication of consumers out there, and therefore more opportunity. Secondly, we are playing in that space too. We have actually, people think of MasterCard as a credit card player. We're a payment player that does card payments. We don't extend credit. We do card payments. We do stablecoin payments, as we just discussed, but we also do real-time payments. And we operate the real-time payments platforms in about 13 countries in the world, including, for example, the UK, the Philippines, Thailand, where very large volumes of real-time payments are managed on our platforms. So we play there too, not everywhere in the world, but in some places. And then thirdly, we need to make sure that cards, who are today still slow, meaning if you make a payment today with your card, the merchant will get the money tomorrow. That's really not great in a real-time environment. We need to make sure that cards move to real-time clearing and real-time settlement. And so we started the evolution. Again, hopefully it will take less than 20 years, but it'll take maybe 5 to move the world of card payments to truly real-time, so that we can effectively compete. The one thing, though, that is important to note as well is that these real-time payment systems are always domestic in nature. They're always focused on a country, on Belgium, on France, on Portugal. And that means that they can be very adapted to the local needs of consumers, which gives them a huge, I would say, advantage. That also means, though, that for some of the big technology evolutions like agentic, it might be a little harder for them to plug into that. And so that's why we believe there is actually space for multiple payment systems, for multiple use cases, and that consumer choice is actually what will give the consumer the best outcome. Right? The more players, the more choice, the more options, the better for the consumer involved. The domestic nature of it also has another element that we increasingly worry about, is that fraudsters will go after these systems as they start to scale. We have a very global view about what is going on. When we see a flare happening in the Philippines, and we say, "Oh, there's a vulnerability here," we lock that down. Mm-hmm. In Canada, right? We're very quick on monitoring and taking actions. If you have a smaller view, you actually end up more vulnerable. And we are seeing real-time payment fraud really skyrocketing, scams mainly, skyrocketing everywhere in the world. And so we do worry, and we are actually engaged with many of these systems to say, how can we help protect consumers from these scams, often generated by AI, that could pose a real vulnerability there.
I had a very interesting conversation with the former chairman of Groupe Carte Bancaire, the group, le GIE, yeah. Groupe Carte Bancaire, and we mentioned that fraud has a huge element to consider in the coming years. We have less and less time to talk. I'm frustrated because I have a long list of other questions. Just a few minutes on the card experience, because if we see solutions like, I'm a huge fan of Revolut. I'm using Revolut daily, and companies like Revolut have completely revolutionized the card experience, what we call the lifestyle-centric card proposition. So how do you adapt to this growing need of consumers toward the card issuer?
You're right. A Revolut, a Monzo, a Nubank, and N26. These are all fintechs who have really, gotten ahead of some of the technology trends to make sure that they offer consumers a real consumer-centric proposition. And that is in terms of usability, the kind of user experience, but often also the added features on top of that consumers care about and that they like. we therefore like to partner with those types of players, right? Many of these players are well aligned with MasterCard, and that kind of interplay with these hard charging, very sophisticated, tech savvy players and us, frankly, keeps us on our toes and make sure that we are responding to that and make sure that we're moving in lockstep. It's the privilege of a network, right? You have, like I said, we have 23,000 banks. We can't be moving at the pace of the slowest of those. We need to be moving at the pace of the fastest so that we can enable them to win, enable them to earn the trust of their consumers. And so that's I think our superpower, frankly. We don't have to invent things ourselves all the time. We have plenty of people who invent it for us, with us. And that co-creation discipline is what I think in the last decade we probably really ramped up over time. It's what makes us look around the corners in time, because again, we only see what we see. But those players, not just a Revolut, but like an Accel, for example, that you mentioned, those players are deeply engaged with us. Can be very tiny companies, deeply engaged with us, and that allow us to look around corners, allow us where is the world moving to? How do we need to change our big machinery so that we can allow those to be successful? I think it's what will keep us relevant on our toes for the decades to come.
Perfect. So you mentioned the word discipline. I'm a very disciplined person. So one question about your team, how do you maintain this innovation discipline at scale? Because it's a very competitive and regulated environment. So how do you maintain that thin balance between those two? Regulation, but also innovation?
I would say regulation, innovation, but also how do we the short and the long term? And we very much think about kind of horizons. We have a 18 months horizon of work that we need to do to make the revenues. Right? Every quarter, we're up there at earnings. We need to make sure it clicks along, and there's a lot of work happening on just making sure that we execute with the Revoluts of this world and grow our business here and now, right? I would say that's probably 60% of our mind share goes to that, because we need to win today to have the right to play for tomorrow, right? Then we look at the next, I would say 3-4 years. What are the things that we need to put in place to make sure that we are architecting the agentic and all that the right way? It's probably 25%. I mean, I'm just saying, this is not scientific, right? But it's meaningful, but it is looking a little bit ahead. And a lot of our R&D and engineering looks at those horizons. And then we have smaller teams looking, okay, beyond 5 years, what's out there, what's coming at us. That is truly more fundamental research around where do we need to head and prepare ourselves. And then also both the second and the third horizon is trying to think about how does regulation evolve, what will be allowed to do or not allowed to do, and adapt. Again, this is not super scientific, but it's very clear that all of my teams have 3 horizons. They have to deliver now. They have to look at tomorrow, and there's no small team that just does the out there stuff. Because then what happens if you do that? I find at least is that they are generating more work, and that horizon could just grow beyond proportion, and an inordinate amount of our resource could be misallocated, right?
And non-practical, maybe.
And non-practical things. Yeah, it's very easy to get excited about something and spend a lot of time on it. We have this saying in MasterCard is, if it doesn't scale, it doesn't matter. And so we have a very strong filters around, okay, well, is that where we want to put our efforts? That may be relevant for Solène, but how many Solènes are there, right? We need to go for things that can be relevant for billions of people, right? We serve 3.5 billion people. And that is really a difficult, the difficult task we have, Selene, is saying no to great ideas, because the really great ideas need to get the yes. And that is a real continuous battle, I would say. We don't get it always right, but I think by the by, we have a good rhythm.
Perfect. Jorn, I had a closing perspective question, but I believe you already answered it. But maybe I will ask you in a few words, if you had to make one prediction about payments in 2030, which prediction would it be?
Well, it's a tough one. But I would say my prediction would be that consumers will have choice, and that those choices will allow them to do what they want to do in the environments that they want to play, but with the peace of mind and the security that players like us need to deliver. Firstly, it's a hope that we will be able to do that, but actually I have a reasonably high conviction that we will succeed in doing that. People never get up in the morning wanting to make a payment. They want to be doing something else. And the payment should be pretty much of an afterthought that they don't worry about. That is my mission.
I like this one. Okay, Jorn, my last word is systematically book or podcast recommendations. So what would you like us to read or listen?
Oh, well, so I actually a fiction reader. I don't read any nonfiction really, because I spend my day reading emails and journals and what have you. So when I take up a book, it is always fiction. And so I don't really have a great recommendation for the group. I think you are way better positioned than I am to give guidance to this group.
Okay, perfect.
But if one day you want a discussion on nonfiction literature, I'm very happy to do that.
Have a very nice day, Jorn. That was so insightful. Thank you for your precious time. I hope you're coming in the coming years to make a sort of retrospective on the Agentic.
Yeah, we can chat again in 2030 to see if I was right.
We'll see. Thank you, Jorn. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to FinScale. Don't hesitate to subscribe to the newsletter on Substack to stay up to date with the latest innovations. You can also find the podcast in audio format on all listening platforms and in video format on YouTube. See you soon with Solène Niederkorn.